Welcome to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast, where we celebrate Minnesota's incredible fiction authors and the stories that make our literary scene so vibrant. I'm Rob Jung.
And I'm Michael McBride. Together, we're the team behind Bell Cow Productions and the Bell Cow Catalog, a digital catalog designed to connect Minnesota authors with readers, libraries, and indie bookstores.
The catalog will be heading to all 377 Minnesota libraries, 80 plus indie bookstores, plus those in border cities such as Sioux Falls, Fargo, Superior, and La Crosse.
And now with this podcast, we get to bring those amazing voices to life. Every episode features one of our herd members talking about their books, their writing journey, and the stories behind the stories.
And before we start, let us apologize for all the cow-related puns you're about to hear.
All right, let's dig in.
Well, we are thrilled tonight to have author Michael Mallory with us. He's the author of a classic mystery series featuring Detective Henry Lau, who is also I got to make sure I get this right, a Kung Fu master. Michael, welcome.
Well, thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful to meet you. And I can't wait to hear more about the story. But maybe as a way of starting, could you give us just a little bit of your background? Like where you come from, how you come to mysteries, any of those things to kind of help listeners learn a bit about you.
Sure. I'm currently live in St. Louis Park. Grew up in South Minneapolis, went to the University of Minnesota. I have a bachelor's degree in English literature, but that's from the 20th century. Went back to school. I always enjoyed math and science, and so I got a degree from a community college for electronics. Of course, that's back in the day. I got into the computer industry, and that was where I basically worked for, I guess, almost all my career in various roles in IT, information technology. I retired a few years ago, and it's really nice. But so on the technical side, I have an interest there, but on the humanities side, I also have that interest there. That kind of reflects my two interests. And I think it reflects in my writing as well.
Michael, I have a question that has that maybe you've already answered just in the answer you gave, but have you had any acting experience?
Nope.
The reason I ask is because for those of you who don't know, Michael Mallory was recently a guest on Minnesota Mystery Night. And I will tell you that you got rave reviews from the audience.
Wow.
And so I was wondering, because you were Mr. Smooth.
Was I? It didn't feel that way. Sherry Johnson, who I appeared with, I thought she was smooth, but thanks.
You were both very good, and we've been doing this Minnesota Mystery Night for 3 years, and many people afterwards said that's the best one we've ever had. So thank you for that. And,
thanks for the feedback. Well, I did have not acting experience, but for a number of years, and that's how I met my wife, I was participating in Toastmasters. And for those that don't know, it's a public speaking organization where you get up and give short, like 2-minute speeches on a variety of topics. So I had a few years of that. So that helps to get in front of strangers and talk and swallow the fear and maybe hopefully come across coherently.
Well, I love it.
Tell us about Henry Lau.
Yeah, and how you developed him. Like, I'm kind of curious. Like, yeah, as someone who hasn't read your book yet, I'm curious to hear who he is and how he came to you.
I'd be happy to. The short version is I've been writing mystery short stories for decades. My first book was written by a co-author friend. It's called Death Roll. It was published by a traditional publisher. It featured Mystery's first zoologist sleuth because we both had a love of animals, and we both had two friends who worked at the Minnesota Zoo, and so we set it at an imaginary zoo in Apple Valley, and reflected our interest in animals. Basically, we killed the director of the Minnesota Valley Zoo, and when I asked, this was back in 2007, friends of mine who worked at the zoo who would want to kill the director? They all said, everyone. So anyway, but that's a long time ago. And I would have continued. I wrote 2 books with my friend, but she no longer wanted to write. She wanted to focus on photography. We remained friends and so forth, but I wanted to do something else. And as I will say, my day job got a little, well, difficult. There were layoffs and so forth, so I couldn't write a lot. So I was focusing more on short fiction. And I had about 20, in the last 15 years, 20 short story crime stories published and so forth. But I wanted to write another book. And part of it is, okay, what do I want to write? And the catch is with an amateur sleuth, which is what we had in our Zookeeper sleuth, is that's fun, but in the real world, nobody has to listen to an amateur sleuth. They say, go away, you're not the police. And so I wanted my next detective to have some authority. So part of the reason I made him who he is that I also want to do an interesting background. I didn't want to do and this isn't a slam, it may sound like it, but there's been so many books written, with hardcore cops, hardcore detectives, and a lot of them are excellent, but it's kind of a trope. And for me to step into that, I figured I'd have to be really good to do something different. So I just decided to go in a different direction. So my concept was that these are police procedurals, but I'm writing them as if they're standard detective stories. And my lead character, Henry Lau, is a senior detective for a fictional town, western suburbs of Minneapolis called Gillette, Minnesota. It's Plymouth. But that way I can make up my own rules, because I learned that different municipalities have different rules as far as the police do. So if I made him a St. Paul cop or a Minnetonka cop or whatever, a reader might go, well, they wouldn't do that because they know. But if it's in my town, I can make up what I want, because I found that different towns do different things. So there's that. But his background specifically was that I studied and taught a style of Kung Fu for about 12 years in the metro area. And they say, write what you know. And so I thought, well, I have the IT background. Initially, I was going to give them that as a background, but other people have been doing that in the last 10 years. So I thought, I want to do this. And so I could interject some of the martial arts into the story, his background, and the philosophy kind of colors his view of life. And there's a backstory that's revealed in the first book and the second book about how he became who he is. And so, again, that background colors what he does. And I think it's something that's not been done, at least to that degree, before. And I just got a visit from a cat. It's Teddy. Hi, Teddy. Hi, Teddy.
Oh.
Mine often walk on the couch behind me back there as well. So it's always good to see a cat on a Zoom.
But the other part of the answer is I have 2 protagonists. I have Henry Lau, and he's, again, 44 years old, and he was in a horrible accident, which is explained in the first book, that had him in intensive care for months. He had to learn to walk again, all of that. He's back on the force now for a couple of months, and he's not quite 100%. His new partner, temporary partner, is his 27-year-old niece, Janet Lau, who's just been promoted to detective. And the dynamic is that it's uncle and niece. She knows information about him, stories that she remembers as a little girl, and he knows stories about her. And so they kind of commingle because they have different points of view. They kind of switch points of view from one to the other. And I got that idea by, Tony Hillerman writes the Joe Leaphorn Jim Chee novels that are based in the Southwest. And I thought I'd use that approach as far as telling the story. So that's the approach I took.
Interesting.
You have a background. You personally have a background in martial arts, don't you?
Yeah, for again 12 years. I wasn't a young guy. I was never a, shall we say, badass at it. I started like when I was like 42 years old, and I quit when I was in my mid 50s because this, you know, you learn that if you're really serious about that stuff, you have to be like a professional athlete, and that wasn't me. But I still retain an interest in it, and so even though I don't practice it as much or as intensely, I'll say that, as I did when I first started, I still acquire new knowledge and there's new revelations and that kind of thing. And that's kind of what I sprinkle into the stories. But yeah, I did teach for a while and and observe other people too. There's a lot of different types of martial arts, and a lot of them are very beautiful and interesting. And um, I just thought that'd be an interesting sort of background for him.
Yeah, definitely. I know my children did Taekwondo, and it was fascinating to see the dynamic in the space, where you have the black belts breaking off and kind of working with different people on different levels. And like I was just thinking about like that kind of community sharing instruction aspect is super interesting in a way that I don't think I would have appreciated if I hadn't been there to witness it. It's not something I thought about, but
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is a substantial part of both books, but it's not the major theme. I mean, they're mystery novels, and so there is a murder, and they need to be solved. And it's just they happen to involve the first book, which I'll show, the Lost Dragon Murder, uh, happens to do with a Chinese artifact, and it's a real artifact uh, that appears in Minneapolis for some reason, and there's a murder associated with it, and part of it has to do at a martial arts school. At least the victim was attending that. So that allows Henry to go there and find out what's going on, see if there's a connection. In the second book, which I'll show, which is Tiger Claw, um, continues the story, and we learn more about his background after he graduated college and went to Hong Kong. And that's kind of a sub plot, story B, that Janet, his niece, wants to know because he never talks about it. And she wants to know why doesn't he talk about what happened to him in Hong Kong? And you find out. And it's somewhat relevant to the main story because it reveals his character.
So what who is your inspiration for your writing of this kind of police procedural slash classic mystery?
Almost everybody, but I guess there's a couple in particular. I mean, I'm not focused so much on the police procedural. The two contemporary authors that influenced me the most, the Minnesota's, William Kent Kruger, um, um, his style, his way of storytelling, and there's Canadian author, mega famous, popular Louise Penny, who writes the Chief Inspector Gamache stories, and her style and her type of writing, and that, and I guess I also mentioned um, uh, the Jim Chi Leaphorn books. Um, those are an influence, but I'm not focused as so much as the police procedural. I might be fudging a little on that, but
Okay.
I don't get hip deep into it.
Mhm.
It's more like I said, I treat it more like a detective story, like almost like he's a private detective, but he's with the police. So it's kind of a fuzzy fine line. And so there's wiggle room there. I mean, at least I hope there is, but at least from some of the feedback I've gotten, it seems to work, at least for some people.
I love it. Well, would you read a short bit for us? What
I
from
would
either of
love,
them? It's really up to you.
yeah. I'll start out with the Tiger. I mean, this is the Lost Dragon Murder. This is the first book in the series. Um, because it introduces the character. So, chapter one. For a man who hated violence, Henry Law was awfully good at it. Well schooled in the way of the fist, he had considerable experience in its use. Not that you'd know to look at him, slightly under average height, with an affable face and a rangy, athletic build more suitable to a tennis player than a fighter, there was nothing remotely intimidating about him until he touched you. By then it was too late. By then the pummeling had exploded on you with the heart-stopping suddenness of a high-speed car wreck, in whose aftermath lay the rubble of contusions, numb joints, or broken bones. Henry's niece, a perceptive young woman who appreciated both the fine arts and wordplay, liked to call him a virtuoso of destruction. At the moment, he didn't feel like a virtuoso of anything unless it was of aches and pains. A bum knee and dodgy lower vertebrae made him feel every day of his 44 years as he loped along the sidewalk, glad his car was parked a block away. A vigorous workout had left him looking forward to home, a hot shower, and leftovers. A sound, faint, transitory, pinged into his awareness, a blip against the urban street noise of West Lake Street. Most people wouldn't have noticed. Henry did. 2 decades of training and experience had sensitized him to things out of the ordinary. As his first kung fu teacher had said, in nature, animals are vigilant to disturbances in the world around them, no matter how small. If they aren't, they get killed. Henry paid attention. Another sound, this time a muffled chop against the pavement. It was late evening in mid-October, a Minnesota October, one where darkness fell like a steel curtain before the first snowfall made the night world bright again. The glow of street lamps didn't quite reach into the shadows between the rear of the buildings across the street. Henry couldn't get a beat on the sound. Slowing his gait, he squinted into the dark recess between Jasmine imported foods and Falafel Palace. Perhaps it was nothing. Someone taking out the trash. A stray cat. His instinct said no. He crossed the street at an angle to ensure the streetlights didn't backlight him, moved with caution into the alcove. As he drew near, vague outlines took on solid shapes. He could make out 3 figures by a dumpster, or a fourth crumpled on the asphalt, clutching his belly and groaning. It was a mugging, or worse.
Awesome. I love your opening line.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's a great hook for sure.
Awesome. So that doesn't reflect it, but I've read your books and you have a sense of humor. And it comes through in your writing. How do you find it difficult to make what is, at least in the log lines, a really serious, subject matter, serious plot line, and then yet you have this almost whimsy that sometimes runs through your writing? Does it come naturally, or is that something you really work at?
It comes naturally, but I do have to be careful. I mean, I'm choosing the subject. I mean, it's a murder mystery, and so I need to treat that with a certain gravitas. But on the other hand, the tone is semi-serious. There are some serious parts, and I hopefully treat those with the right amount of seriousness. But there's other areas where not so much. Um, I'm naturally sarcastic, and so I can't write a solid, hardcore, dark story, because somewhere in there I'm going to find something funny or maybe satiric to put in there. It's hard not to, but that's part of the fun of this. There are dark scenes, but never too dark, and I like to balance it with some humor. And part of the fun, actually the most fun of writing these 2 stories, is, apart from the trying to tell a compelling, interesting mystery, it's the relationship between the 2 detectives. Janet teases her uncle a lot, but she relies on him, and he's looking out for her. Which the reasons beyond family relationships you learn from the first book. He has a particular motive for making sure she succeeds. But just their interplays I find really interesting, and so the humor is a lot in there, and sometimes the the narrator. There's actually three voices that I use. There's the two points of view. One is Henry's point of view, a kind of alternate chapters with Henry's point of view in some chapters, and then Janet's point of view in others. And the third, which is sort of overall, is the narrator who may interject about both of them. As that beginning is, that's the narrator.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I love that. For me, one of my very favorite things is a narrator that is kind of intrusive at times. I like that kind of. I mean, those are the kind of books I enjoy reading because it lends itself to some of the whimsy and lightheartedness and kind of a balance, but also an objective perspective that you don't get otherwise. So, and you know, I think life is complicated, right? It's happy, it's sad, it's, you know, tragic, it's humorous, it's, and if you are a police officer or anybody who works around, you know, crime or deaths, there's a level of gallows humor, I think, to get through it as well. So it kind of makes sense to me, but
No, I totally agree with that. And again, these aren't heavy books. As like I said, I don't write dark books because I like to hang out with better people.
Is there a third Henry and Janet Lau book in the making?
I'm working on it. Right now, I'm kind of on pause. I started it, but I'm not entirely satisfied with the story. And part of it, I need to know what the story is to some degree. I just don't write by the seat of my pants the entire novel. I need to know the start, the middle, and how it's going to end. And then I fill in the gaps. And that is what I do by the seat of my pants. It's like, okay, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get there? And that those are moments of discovery, but I need a target and an overall concept before I feel satisfied. And I'm still wrestling with a couple ideas. But yes, there should be a third one.
so I love process, and so hearing you talk that through, like actually that works very similarly to me, where I need to know like kind of the big picture elements, but I like to play in between there. But I'm curious, like, what does that process actually look like for you? Like, do you use note cards? Is it just in your head? Are you just like mowing the lawn for me is like my, or shoveling, you know, depending on the season here, is my mindless thing that I can do and let my brain wander. I'm just kind of curious what it looks like for you.
Some of my best writing is when I'm walking. We walk every day, or if I'm walking in a park by a lake, you know, just that 20 minutes or half an hour. Back in the day when I was working full time, um, I worked downtown Minneapolis, parked my car about a mile away and would walk because it's free parking. The farther you get away from downtown, the cheaper it is. And so I parked free. And so that mile walk every day to and from, I could think. And sometimes just driving to work, I could think of things and then let it kind of marinate in my head or write it down and then deal with it that night. Also, I make notes. I'm going to turn my camera. Can you see those post-it notes?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, those are part of the thing I do. It's like I mean I've got things I can write on the computer, but I'll have like an idea and I'll just slap it on the wall, and you know, just to go back later, like, okay, what was that? Just because sometimes just, you know, you reject them, but that way I can keep somewhat of a loose track of them. But my first drafts are always nasty. Like I said, they're pretty much crap. There's some good things, but a lot of bad things. But I learned long ago that's okay. I'm a semi-perfectionist that way, but I learned that, you know, you read a draft and you realize, oh, there's all these typos or it's incomplete. There may be sections like I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'll just fill in later and then come back on the second draft. Um, that's fine because once you have a draft, you've got something to play with. And that's what I think long ago that would bog me down. I'd get maybe 4 or 5 chapters saying like, what next? What next? And you go back and rewrite the same stuff over and over and you never get past that. So it's just like, this is good enough for now, move on. And if I don't know what's going on, skip it. Just make a note. You got to do this later. And then continue. You just want to make some kind of progress, good or bad. And then, I mean, that's why you have rewrites. Um, the this book went through 10 drafts, and this one went through 9 drafts before I was finished. And again, the last 4 or 5 are mainly just polishing, maybe cutting words, looking for typos and grammar and that kind of thing. But in the Lost Dragon Murder, it was the 4th draft. I realized there's something I needed to change, and I changed it, and it made the story much better. But those are the kind of things as a writer, you're looking at so many things. There's so many balls to juggle, and you can't always see the big picture until enough of them are good, or you've got control of them, that you can step back and go, that doesn't seem to be working, and that does. And I'm getting feedback from people also is good, but
Definitely. I can't remember what writer taught me it, but his trick was he was always getting derailed by looking things up, which is my guilty thing as well. Like I'll be writing, I'll be like, oh, 1987. Why did I choose that year? I don't know what was going on in 87. And I look in the news and whatever and that kind of stuff. And his trick was he just wrote TK. So like when he came to something, he would just put TK because there's no English words that use that combination. And then he would come back and search. So if he needed like the weather, he would just plug it in later. But to your point, he would get far enough into the story that it was worth going back and salvaging those details afterwards. So
sure.
sometimes you get stuck and you mire in that spot and you never move, and then great, you have a polished paragraph, but what's the rest of the story? So
Exactly. And in fact, I had that as an issue in the second book, because there's again, story B takes place 20 years earlier, with Henry, who just graduated from college, goes to Hong Kong to up his fighting skills because of a tragedy. And so I've never been to Hong Kong, and and so I did a lot of research on Hong Kong, not now, but in 2002. And so the history, and okay, what neighborhood am I going to put him in? And I had to look for pictures, and so that was a fair amount of research. And then got to a point like, well, I'm not sure. But the thing is that I learned a while ago, and I had to remind myself of that, is you want details, but too much detail, then people can realize that's not right. But if you just give them enough so that they have an idea what you're talking about, and details but be vague, then you're on safe ground. So I was able to do that. I wasn't sure I was going to pull it off, but I think I did.
If you don't like research, you probably don't write. So how critical is it for you to have it right?
Yeah, it's a tough question. It depends what it is. For some things, like for police procedure, I don't have to have it 100% right, because what I'm doing is sort of, again, a sort of a fuzzy area. I try to get a few technical things right, but it's not, maybe 100% correct. But I'm okay with that. I'm not, uh, advertising these as true to life, police procedurals. These are mystery novels. But I want some of the background to be accurate. So again, the kung fu stuff that I'm putting in, I want that to be as accurate as I know. And part of that in the Lost Dragon Murder, the dragon was basically on, there's a famous, I didn't know it was famous until I was researching, fountain in the old summer palace in Beijing. It was a water clock that was made up of human figures. I mean, this was like life-size human figures with the heads of the Chinese zodiac animals. So you had rabbit, goat, dragon, it's fish, and so forth. And twice a day, water would spout out from one of the heads to tell the time. And well, excuse me, every hour it would do that. And then twice a day at midnight and noon, all the heads would spout water. And it was like some glorious thing that was built out of bronze. But when the British and French invaded China and in the Opium Wars, like in the 1860s, and they raided the palace, they looted it, and it stole the bronze heads. And so the Chinese government has been over the last couple of decades trying to reclaim them, and they've got most of them. There was I have the year wrong now, but it's right in the book. I think it was 2012. The French fashion designer Yves Saint Laurent sold the rabbit head at an auction in Paris at Christie's for $20 million. So all but 5, when I wrote the book, of the heads had been recovered and sent to China. One of them was the dragon head, which shows up in Minneapolis. So that part I wanted to be accurate, as far as the history of the fountain and all that stuff. So that required a fair amount of research and a lot of digging to find out what did they actually look like, how big were they. But other things, you might go, well, what about that? Like,
Yeah, I sort of have a plausibility litmus paper test. That there in several of my books, there's some fairly intricate medical issues. And I have, luckily, a retired pathologist who is my consultant on those, who insists on trying to tell me the medical certainty of all things. And then after he's done, I winnow it all out and I figure out what's plausible in the eyes of the reader. And that's what we fly with. But it seems to work.
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 kinds of readers in that sense. There's ones who that eat up all that technical stuff.
Yeah.
But the majority want enough so they understand what's going on and not more than that, because then it becomes boring or confusing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the part that Elmore Leonard said leave out because the readers skip it. So one of the things we do, Michael, on these, when we get down toward the end of our podcast, is we do what I call a lightning round, and Michael has a different title for it, but it all amounts to the same thing. We ask what are supposed to be designed to be very quick, short questions that would give listeners and viewers a maybe just a little snapshot into you personally that is wholly apart from your writing and your books and all that sort of thing. So we already know the answer between cats and dogs. So we ask you that one. So Michael, have you got one to start us out with?
I mean, I don't know why, but food is always one of those things that it feels like everybody seems to have a dish they're known for or something they enjoy cooking. And it just kind of gives a different sense of personality. So I'm curious, do you have a dish that people have come to expect when they come to visit you, or is there something you particularly enjoy making?
No, I mean, the easiest thing is, like pasta, but that's not anything special. It's if I have to. A dish that I particularly enjoy, and I don't make it. There's a restaurant, my favorite restaurant, it's in South Minneapolis, and they serve the best grilled salmon I've pretty much ever had outside of Seattle. I have it every
Wow.
time. And they have the best key lime pie in the region. They have their own farm, and it's just outstanding. So it's like every 6 to 8 weeks we go to them in South Minneapolis. It's a little small restaurant, great service. Been going there for a dozen plus years, but nothing I make. But I appreciate what they make.
So you can give them a plug. What's the
I
name?
was going to say, what's the name?
It's Prima. It's in South Minneapolis, 54th and Lindale. They're an Italian restaurant, but not like Olive Garden Italian. They've got things like butternut squash, but yeah, Prima. I've never had a bad meal there,
We've
and
been there times. It's excellent.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they're in the book. They're in Tiger Club, but I renamed them because I didn't want to. Because I have my 2 detectives go there for dinner to hash out part of the case.
Okay. So for you and your wife, would it be a night on the town or a night curled up around the fireplace?
We're homebodies. So we enjoy being home. We do enjoy going out, but typically being home is really the best.
Okay.
I'm curious about childhood literature. Like, what were some of those foundational books that you read young that maybe stuck with you or were favorite authors back then?
Oh, absolutely. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne just knocked my socks off. I remember in high schools when I read the Sherlock Holmes stories for the first time, and
Oh,
I was
wow.
just wow, I was just amazed and thrilled, and been in love with them ever since. And that's kind of what started my love of mysteries and so forth. And when I was in college, I remember this. I think it was my junior year, no, freshman year. And there's a 1935 movie with that made Errol Flynn, if people can remember, him, is his movie hit Captain Blood. And
Mhm.
I got from the library the a copy of the book, and the book was so much better. It just knocked my socks off. And I have actually a 1921 copy on the shelf by Raphael Sabatini, and that kind of storytelling. But it's like, again, humor, swashbuckling pirates, but he's got a satiric edge. He's a doctor and a pirate, reluctantly, and those are big influences. I'm trying to think of anything else. Obviously, the Three Musketeers. How could I leave them out?
Yeah, when you talk about swashbuckling, like that's the first one that comes to mind for me. So, you may be this is random, but you may find this interesting that apparently the University of Minnesota has, I can't remember if it is the largest collection or
It
one
is
of the Sherlock of like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's stuff.
memorabilia. Yeah, I've been there. It's been
Yeah.
about a dozen years, but yeah, it's amazing that they have the largest collection.
Basically, it sounded like a bunch of the stuff was up for auction, and somebody at the U of M was just like started acquiring it, and then they attracted other professors who were interested in O'Doyle's work, and they like just kind of now they just have a bunch. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
strange. Well, it's the Dragon Head ending up in Minneapolis.
yeah,
So, if there was one person alive or dead that you could have a long lunch with, who would it be and what would you talk about?
Wow. There wouldn't be one person. I mean, the writer in me would like to meet, maybe some famous mystery writers from the past, but with that opportunity, you go, what about a historical figure, from the past? So I just can't name anybody off the top of my head because I'd say, well, no, him or her.
Okay, all right.
I
Here's
was.
one.
Oh, go ahead.
I got one. Tony Bennett, Carrie Underwood, Katy Perry, or Andrea Bocelli.
Who would I? Who? Well, I'll just say Tony Bennett.
Okay.
And maybe just to close, since we're recording in November, I'm thinking about holidays. Do you have a favorite holiday that, for whatever reason, something that you enjoy and a tradition to go with it, I guess?
I guess like a lot of people, I Halloween is my favorite. Not that I do any dressing up anymore, but I like fall's my favorite season. I also like winter, but I live in Minnesota, so I try to enjoy all the seasons. But there's something about fall that I think is particularly interesting, particularly for a mystery writer. Um, just the atmosphere, and there's something uh, fun and just curious and mysterious and about Halloween, that whole thing with the dressing up and costumes, and um, so that's fun. I think that's my favorite.
Cool.
Michael, it's been a pleasure. It's been a lovely half hour or so. We've had a chance to chat and get to know you a little better and hear more about your books. So thanks for being on the Bell Cow podcast.
Well, thanks much. I appreciated coming. It's been a great time.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll be sure to include links and everything to where so people can find your books. I guess one last question is, do you have any favorite bookstores in town that we should make sure to point people to that stock your books?
Once Upon a Crime books in South Minneapolis. They do so much for local authors.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to definitely be the popular one for sure, especially with the mysteries. It totally fits and they are wonderful. So um,
Anyway, thanks, guys.
yeah, thanks again. It was wonderful meeting you.
And don't forget, you can see this book and more from Minnesota authors in the Bell Cow catalog, heading to libraries and indie bookstores across Minnesota and beyond.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bell Cow Author Roundup podcast. We'll be back next Tuesday with another amazing Minnesota author.